The sky was black over Chernobyl, but something below it was burning bright, unnaturally bright. A pillar of light, blue and flickering, pierced the darkness above Reactor 4. People in the nearby town of Pripyat stood on balconies, drawn to it like moths. Children pointed. Couples held hands. It looked beautiful. Nobody realized that light was death made visible. They were witnessing the moment when a power plant became a weapon. It was April 26, 1986. Inside the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant, the control room buzzed with routine. They were preparing to run a test, not a dangerous experiment, at least not on paper. The goal was simple: simulate a power outage to make sure the emergency systems could keep the reactor stable. That test had been postponed several times already. The higher-ups were growing impatient. Orders came down to proceed. No delays. The operators that night were overworked, undertrained, and deeply aware that failure wasn't an option. Not in the Soviet Union, not under that pressure. As they began the procedure, they shut off several safety systems to avoid interference. It was standard. Dangerous, but common. What they didn't realize was that the reactor was already unstable. Dropping the power too low had created a condition known as xenon poisoning, which made the reactor less responsive. To raise power back up, they withdrew almost all of the control rods, another red flag. By the time they began the test, the reactor was a loaded gun with the safety off. And then came the final step: reinserting the rods to simulate an emergency shutdown. Only the rods had graphite tips, and due to a fatal design flaw, they initially increased the reaction rather than stopping it. In less than 5 seconds, the core went from unstable to uncontrollable. Heat surged, steam built up. Then, an explosion. A second followed immediately. A 2,000-ton steel lid launched into the air like a coin off a thumb. The roof was gone. The reactor was open to the sky. Radiation, fire, and graphite scattered into the night. Inside the plant, chaos erupted. Smoke filled the hallways. Alarms failed. Lights flickered. Operators stared at shattered gauges. The deputy chief engineer, Anatoly Dyatlov, refused to believe the reactor had exploded. He ordered staff back into the core to fix what he thought was a water leak. Some obeyed. They walked into a furnace of invisible poison. At 1:28 a.m., local firefighters were dispatched to the plant. They weren't told it was a nuclear incident, just a fire. Some arrived in t-shirts and rubber boots. As they climbed ladders, their boots melted, their hands burned. One firefighter, Viktor Kibanok, picked up a piece of debris. It was graphite from the core. His hand began to smoke. His skin peeled. He dropped it, too late. They fought the flames with hoses and buckets. No protective gear, no warning. One of the first on scene was Vasily Ignatenko, tall, strong, just 25 years old. His wife, Lyudmila, watched from their apartment as the sky turned strange shades of orange and blue. By sunrise, Vasily was in the hospital, vomiting uncontrollably. His skin blistered. His lips cracked. He could barely speak. Lyudmila found him in a sealed hospital room. "Don't touch him," the nurse said. "He's radioactive." But she did. She sat beside him, kissed his forehead, held his hand. She was pregnant. She didn't care. By the 3rd day, Vasily's organs were liquefying. His skin sloughed off like paper. He died in agony. His body was buried in a zinc-lined coffin, sealed in concrete. His unborn child would later die of radiation-induced defects. And yet, life in Pripyat went on. The morning after the explosion, children played in sandboxes. Families went shopping. The air buzzed with radiation, but the authorities said nothing. It wasn't until 36 hours later that they ordered evacuation. Over 50,000 people were told to pack for a short trip. "Just a few days," officials said. You'll be back soon. They never returned. Homes were left exactly as they were, plates on the tables, toys on the floor, clocks still ticking. Pripyat became a tomb. The Soviet government remained silent. They told the world nothing. But radiation doesn't respect borders. It drifted over Belarus, Poland, Sweden. At a nuclear plant in Sweden, sensors began to spike. Workers feared a leak until they realized the radiation was coming from outside. Only then did the USSR admit something had happened. International pressure mounted. Scientists around the world analyzed wind patterns and isotope data. They knew it was serious, but still underestimated how bad it was. Inside the exclusion zone, things were worse than anyone imagined. Thousands of liquidators were drafted. Soldiers, engineers, miners, volunteers. Their job, contain the disaster. Many were told nothing. They were handed shovels and brooms, sent into radioactive zones without proper gear. Some were tasked with clearing the reactor roof, where debris from the core had landed. Robots were tried first, but the radiation fried their circuits. So they sent in men. With lead aprons, makeshift shields, and dosimeters that often didn't work, they ran across the roof in 90-second bursts, throwing chunks of irradiated graphite back into the core. They called them bio-robots. The work was grueling. Some collapsed immediately. Others died months later. Many developed cancer. Most were never properly compensated. Helicopters flew over the open core, dropping sand, lead, boron. Pilots flew directly into radioactive plumes. One miscalculation, one gust of wind, and their cockpit turned into a death trap. Some flew dozens of missions. They didn't live long. Meanwhile, wildlife in the area suffered grotesquely. Birds dropped from the sky mid-flight. Trees turned red, then black. In a patch of forest near the reactor, every living thing died. They call it the Red Forest to this day. Villages were bulldozed, homes buried under earth, animals slaughtered en masse, but not everyone left. Some elderly residents refused to abandon their land. "I've survived the Germans," one woman said. "I'll survive this." She did, but many others did not. In hospitals across the USSR, children began showing signs of radiation poisoning. Thyroid cancers spiked, birth defects increased. No one knew how far the damage would spread. Some say we still don't. The official death toll remains low, around 31 direct deaths. But independent estimates suggest tens of thousands died from related cancers and diseases over the following decades. Some estimates go as high as 90,000. And still, the core smolders. In the years after the disaster, engineers built a massive concrete sarcophagus over Reactor 4 to contain the radiation. But it wasn't enough. By the late 1990s, it was crumbling. In 2016, a new structure, twice the size of the Statue of Liberty, was slid over the old one. It should last a century. After that, no one knows. The danger hasn't passed. Inside the ruins, radioactive lava still festers. A black mass of melted fuel and metal, known as the elephant's foot, sits beneath the reactor. In 1986, standing near it for 5 minutes was fatal. Today, it's safer, but still lethal over time. Chernobyl wasn't just a nuclear catastrophe, it was a human one. It exposed the flaws of a system built on secrecy, denial, and obedience. It showed what happens when experts are silenced, warnings ignored, and truth buried until it explodes. And perhaps worst of all, it's not unique. The world has other reactors, other bureaucracies, other moments where safety takes a back seat to pride. The lessons of Chernobyl weren't just written in textbooks. They're written in graves, in ghost towns, in the fading memories of those who were told it was safe and believed it. Thank you for listening to Road to Ruins. Subscribe for more true stories where systems fail and people pay the price.